So here's the official explanation for the $21.8 million worth of unsold as-ever inventory reportedly sitting in a warehouse. According to sources described as having direct knowledge of the business, who spoke to People magazine in January 2026, those massive stock levels were, and this is a direct quote, obviously part of the international expansion plans the Duchess has spoken about for the brand. Their words, not mine. Now let's compare that to what Lady Colin Campbell later confirmed on camera, and what remarkably few people bothered to follow up on. You cannot simply take jam, honey, spreads, and condiments made in the United States and ship them internationally under one single formulation. Every country has its own import requirements, food safety regulations, and certification standards. Australia, which just so happens to be the market the Sussexes reportedly visited for private business meetings, requires imported food products to go through its biosecurity import conditions database. That means separate inspections, labeling compliance, and product testing depending on the category. The FDA does provide export certification for human food products in the United States. However, as of 2024, that certification applies to only 6 destination markets: Chile, China, the European Union, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, and the United Kingdom. Australia is not among them, and Australia is only the beginning. The European Union requires novel food compliance assessments, Japan requires radiation testing certificates, South Korea requires Korean language labeling documentation. Every market is effectively a separate regulatory project. In plain English, that means you cannot simply take the jam currently sitting in a California warehouse and ship it around the world. To do so would require essentially rebuilding the product line from the ground up. New certifications, new labels, new formulation reviews, new regulatory submissions in every target market. That's not a delayed launch. That's a complete product rebuild. And once you understand how international food regulation actually works, the explanation starts to collapse almost immediately. Every serious food exporter already knows this. Read that carefully. Because by the time we get to the part of this video where I show you the 8-week gap between obviously part of our expansion plans and no decisions have been made about international expansion, both statements coming from the same brand's own representatives, you'll see exactly how credible the international expansion explanation really was. Meghan Markle once said that if she had complete anonymity for a month, she would spend every day grocery shopping because she misses it so much. Which naturally raises a question: who's stopping her? Because if the issue is overwhelming public attention, where's the evidence that it's happening? Here's my promise. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the warehouse remains full, why international expansion isn't possible under the current product formulation, why Prince Harry is reportedly concerned about the costs, and why the children are now appearing in the jam videos. Those 4 facts are connected, and that connection is the story nobody else seems to be telling. So, why does this story finally have real substance this week? Because the 8-week contradiction is now fully documented. And once you see the timeline laid out properly, it's impossible to ignore. The 6th of January 2026, the as-ever website glitch occurs. Reddit users discover they can add unusually large quantities of products to their carts, revealing the site's inventory totals. The numbers are staggering. Approximately 220,000 jars of jam, 30,000 jars of honey, 90,000 candles, 80,000 tins of flour sprinkles, 70,000 bottles of wine. The story quickly goes viral. The official response, delivered through sources described as having direct knowledge of the business, appears in People magazine. The message is confident and straightforward. It doesn't take a genius to work out that what is left points to a company doing extremely well. That large stock order was obviously part of the international expansion plans the Duchess has spoken about for the brand. Obviously, existing, active, underway. Then, 8 weeks later, the 9th of March, 2026, ITV News reports that Meghan's trip to Australia included private business meetings focused on expanding as ever internationally. The story gains momentum. And suddenly, the same brand that had cited international expansion as the explanation for the inventory in January releases a new statement through its spokesperson. This is speculation. No decisions have been made about when or where international expansion might take place. No decisions have been made. In just 8 weeks, the story changed. Obviously became speculation. Active expansion plans became a process still under consideration, with no timeline and no confirmed decisions. The inventory remained exactly where it was. The warehouse didn't suddenly become emptier. The only thing that changed was the explanation. And that explanation shifted the moment the Australian expansion narrative attracted enough media attention to require a direct response. Olympic-level backtracking. Truly impressive. The product is still sitting there. And as Lady C pointed out, we're supposed to believe that all of that inventory, products with actual expiration dates attached to them, was being stored because international sales were just around the corner. Yet those international sales still haven't materialized. And here's the detail that makes the contradiction even harder to ignore. The as-ever trademark applications in Australia were filed with the Australian Intellectual Property Office back in September 2024 and approved in June 2025. 12 separate categories were included: skincare, candles, clothing, jewelry, homeware, podcasts, yoga straps, pet feeding mats, and more. All of it filed and approved roughly 18 months before Netflix exited its equity position in March 2026. So the international expansion strategy was already being developed while Netflix was still fully invested in the venture. The Australian trademark filing predates Netflix's departure by roughly 18 months. But here's the important distinction. Registering a trademark in Australia does not give you permission to sell food products in Australia. Those are two completely separate regulatory tracks. You can own the as-ever name in every country on the planet and still be legally prohibited from selling a single jar of jam unless you've gone through that country's specific food safety approval process. The trademark protects the brand. The food certification authorizes the product. And apparently nobody explained that difference before an order was placed for 220,000 jars, 5 charges. Let's walk through them. Charge 1. The explanation that appeared, then disappeared. The 6th of January, 2026. The website glitch happens. Inventory totals become public knowledge. The official explanation, delivered through sources described as having direct knowledge of the business, lands in People magazine with complete confidence. Quote, "It doesn't take a genius to work out that what is left points to a company doing extremely well. That large stock order was obviously part of the international expansion plans the Duchess has spoken about for the brand. Obviously." Then, 8 weeks later, the 9th of March 2026. An as-ever spokesperson tells US Weekly, "This is speculation. No decisions have been made about when or where international expansion might take place. Entering new markets is a considered process. A considered process. No decisions made, after it had supposedly been obviously underway. I know what some people are thinking. Maybe something changed between January and March. Maybe the strategy evolved, fair enough. But that's not what the spokesperson said. They didn't say the plans had changed. They said it was speculation. And speculation is not a plan that later changed course. Speculation is something that was never confirmed to begin with. The inventory didn't move. The warehouse didn't suddenly empty itself. The only thing that changed was the explanation. That's charge 1. An explanation that was delivered confidently behind the scenes and then became noticeably vague in public, all within the span of 2 months. But here's the problem. Even if that explanation had remained consistent, it still wouldn't solve the underlying issue, because the regulatory structure Lady C discussed on camera makes the justification fundamentally unworkable. Which brings us to Charge 2. Charge 2. The regulatory wall nobody bothered to map out. Lady Colin Campbell summed it up during the competing broadcast. Quote, "You can't export food from one place all over the world because each place has different rules and regulations. That's the simple version. The documented version is even more restrictive. Australia's imported food system operates under the Imported Food Control Act 1992 and the Biosecurity Act 2015. Any imported food intended for retail sale must satisfy biosecurity import conditions and comply with the Australia-New Zealand Food Standards Code. Higher-risk food categories are inspected, tested, and held until results are completed. If a shipment fails compliance, it doesn't get sold. It gets re-exported or destroyed at the importer's expense. Destroyed at the importer's expense. Meanwhile, FDA export certification for human food products only covers 6 destination markets as of 2024. Australia is not one of them. Australia requires an entirely separate pathway through BICON. The European Union requires novel food compliance assessments, Japan requires health certificates and radiation testing. South Korea requires Korean language labeling requirements. Every country is essentially its own regulatory project. This isn't a matter of swapping out a shipping label. The inventory currently sitting in a California warehouse was produced for the American market. American labels, American formulation reviews, American ingredient documentation. To sell that same product in Australia, labels must be reformatted to comply with the Australia-New Zealand Food Standards Code. The products must clear BICON inspection requirements. That's not simply a packaging adjustment. That's effectively a market-by-market product rebuild. Apparently, nobody mentioned that before ordering 220,000 jars. That's charge 2, the regulatory wall that transformed the expansion explanation into little more than a holding statement. Now, in theory, regulatory obstacles can be overcome. They're expensive. They're time-consuming, but they're not impossible. The issue that becomes much harder to solve is the financial reality sitting underneath all of it. And that's where Harry enters the picture. Charge 3. The husband reportedly reaches the point of despair. Radar Online reported, citing insider sources, that Prince Harry is privately struggling with the rapidly escalating costs connected to the global expansion strategy. The report's wording was specific. Meghan is reportedly more determined than ever to transform, as ever, into an international brand, while Harry is privately despairing over the soaring costs involved. I know the immediate response. It's a tabloid report. Couples disagree about business decisions all the time. That's true. But think about what soaring costs actually means in this context. Country-by-country food certification expenses, separate biosecurity submissions for Australia, FDA export certification applications, relabeling runs for individual markets, distribution partnerships, potential reformulation reviews for European compliance requirements. And underneath all of that sits the ongoing warehousing bill attached to more than $21 million worth of inventory, all while expiration dates continue moving closer every month. According to those reports, Harry is the one paying close attention to the financial reality. He's supposedly the person in the household who understands the difference between the revenue the brand is actually bringing in and the enormous costs required to execute the expansion strategy. And when you look at it from that perspective, the situation starts to sound almost surreal. The man who left behind his family, his country, his military career, and the entire institutional framework that shaped his identity reportedly finds himself privately despairing over the escalating costs of expanding a jam brand that still hasn't moved its existing inventory. Despair over jam expenses. And then you see Meghan Markle being escorted to her seat at a Balenciaga fashion show by multiple security personnel, and suddenly the optics begin to look very different. Because in a room filled with celebrities who have significantly larger global profiles, people naturally start asking a question. Is the security there primarily for protection? Or has the image itself become part of the presentation? That's charge 3, not gossip about a married couple disagreeing. A reported indicator that the person with perhaps the clearest understanding of the household finances examined the expansion strategy and came away feeling despair rather than excitement. And if you think that disagreement is revealing, wait until you see what Netflix's own executive publicly stated in August 2025 and how the January 2026 inventory leak made that statement look 7 months later. We'll get to that in the legal section in about 5 minutes. Stay with me. Charge 4. What Netflix's own executive said publicly. August 2025. Netflix announces an extension of its partnership with the Sussexes. And during that announcement, Netflix Chief Content Officer Bella Bajaria made a very specific statement in support of the decision. Her exact words, "As ever, products were consistently selling out in record time. Consistently selling out in record time." Those aren't anonymous sources. That's Netflix's Chief Content Officer speaking on the record in August 2025. Now, fast forward 5 months. For the 6th of January 2026, the website glitch reveals approximately 220,000 jars of jam, 90,000 candles, 80,000 tins of flour sprinkles, and 70,000 bottles of wine sitting in storage. Estimated retail value, $21.8 million, consistently selling out in record time, and $21.8 million sitting in a warehouse. Those two claims don't sit comfortably together. Either the products genuinely were selling out at extraordinary speed and something dramatic happened to demand between August and January, or the phrase consistently selling out, referred only to the smaller, limited-release drops that sold quickly while the much larger manufacturing inventory remained untouched in storage. And if that's the case, then the statement used by Netflix's chief content officer to justify a major business expansion was describing only a portion of the inventory picture rather than the full reality. 7 months after making that statement, Netflix exited its equity position. Products were reportedly distributed to employees. And as ever is now, in its own words, standing on its own 2 feet. Standing on its own 2 feet while reportedly sitting on more than $21 million in unsold inventory. That's charge 4. As Lady C remarked, I think 1 month she made $19,000 or something. Do the math on that. The woman has no idea about commerce. Whether people agree with that assessment or not, the point remains the same. The narrative used to justify investment now sits side by side with inventory figures that expose the limits of that narrative. But the most revealing part of this entire story, and the point Lady C raised that almost nobody followed up on, is a detail that predates the product launches, the warehouse inventory, and even the Netflix partnership itself. Because this story didn't begin with As Ever, Charge 5, the pseudonym that existed before the fame. While researching her 2020 book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, Lady Colin Campbell says she uncovered something interesting about Meghan's behavior long before she became globally recognizable. According to Lady C, during Meghan's time working on Suits and within film production circles, she would issue instructions to crew members and PR representatives requiring hotel reservations to be made under a pseudonym because she supposedly couldn't travel under her real name. As Lady C put it, I discovered that Meghan, before she was famous, used to issue diktats to film people and PR people that she needed to be checked into a hotel under a nom de plume because she couldn't go under her real name. Remember the timing. This was before the royal engagement, before widespread international attention. At a point when, according to Lady C's assessment, during the competing broadcast, the average American likely wouldn't have recognized her while walking through a supermarket. Now compare that to 2026. Multiple security escorts accompanying Meghan to a fashion show. A People magazine source discussing a British Airways anniversary card. Claims that grocery shopping has become impossible because of the level of public attention she attracts. Then look at the public appearances. Geneva, where the crowd could practically fit inside a phone box. Australia, where observers openly questioned the scale of genuine public interest. Harry visits Ukraine without the extensive security presentation that appears to accompany many of Meghan's public appearances. Lady Colin Campbell made the comparison directly on camera. Catherine shops, no drama, no security procession, no magazine exclusives. If Catherine can shop, Lady C argued, then Meghan can shop too. And when you examine the level of public recognition reflected in recent international appearances, the evidence points in a particular direction. Many observers would conclude that Meghan could walk into a supermarket in Montecito tomorrow and go largely unnoticed, and that's where the timeline becomes difficult to ignore. The pseudonym before fame, the security entourage after years of relatively modest public turnouts, 2 moments separated by years, yet telling a remarkably similar story. The grocery shopping she says she misses so desperately but somehow never seems able to do. Same performance, different props, 30 years apart. And now the performance requires a new centerpiece because the jam isn't selling. International expansion has run into a regulatory barrier. The man in the household is reportedly in despair. And now the children are appearing in the jam videos. I want to slow down here for a moment because there are 2 actual children at the center of this part of the story, and neither of them chose any role in it. Shane Watson identified the progression perfectly when, with Love, Meghan launched on Netflix. At that stage, the children remained at a tasteful distance. There were brief references. Archie's food preferences. Lilibet asked for chia seeds on her pancakes. The overall message was carefully framed. I just happened to marry someone named Harry. The royal connection was held at arm's length. The children kept off camera. Watson described it as the version of the brand that hadn't yet needed to play its final card. Now that card is sitting openly on the table. Netflix didn't deliver the outcome she hoped for. So, alternative routes are being explored. And no, we're not talking about walking onto MasterChef Australia as though she were the second coming of Julia Child. We're talking about what Watson called the Joker card, the one she's repeatedly told the public is off limits. The card she kept tucked away until now. The mama's little helper mirror selfie, Meghan and Lilibet photographed from behind, matching outfits shared on Instagram, and then the latest product video. Harry appears. Both children appear. Every family member is assigned a favorite jam flavor. Archie likes strawberries. Lilibet likes both. Harry prefers raspberries. Everyone gets a favorite. The question is simple. Why now? Why are the children appearing in promotional product content now when, for years, the stated position was that protecting their privacy mattered above everything else? Not because the business is flourishing and the brand simply wants to celebrate its success, because the company is reportedly sitting on $21 million worth of unsold inventory. Because international expansion faces significant regulatory obstacles. Because Netflix's equity position is gone. And because the royal exile family, the original asset around which the entire commercial structure was built, may be the last remaining card available to play, these are real children. Archie is 6 years old. Lilibet is 4. They're appearing in a commercial video designed to help move products the company has struggled to sell through other means, all in service of a business platform that effectively treats their visibility as a fallback strategy, and they don't understand any of it. Lilibet doesn't know what a BICON submission is. Archie doesn't know the difference between trademark protection and product certification. They like jam. Their mother included them in a video. And the husband, who is reportedly despairing over the rising expansion costs, watched the entire thing unfold. Now let's discuss what this situation actually means in financial terms. Real money. Real regulatory consequences. The warehouse reportedly contains perishable products with expiration dates. Every month that inventory remains unsold, 2 separate costs continue increasing at the same time. Warehousing expenses accumulate, shelf life windows shrink. Once those expiration dates arrive, the products can no longer be sold at full value. They must either be disposed of or heavily discounted to clear inventory. And discounting at that scale creates a different problem. It undermines the premium positioning the brand was built around. A $50 jar of jam sold for $20 is no longer part of a luxury lifestyle brand. It's clearance inventory. Clearance. Not lifestyle. Netflix's exit only made that timeline more difficult. Netflix reportedly invested heavily in As Ever, and, according to multiple reports, distributed products internally to employees after ending its involvement. That gave Netflix a way to reduce its inventory exposure. The products could simply be given away. As Ever doesn't have that luxury. It's left carrying its own inventory burden. And that brings us to a legal question almost nobody seems to be asking. In January 2026, the People magazine source stated that the inventory was obviously being held as part of international expansion plans. If that same characterization was used in discussions with investors, commercial partners, or retail buyers to explain the inventory position, while international expansion was simultaneously being described publicly as unconfirmed speculation, with no decisions made, then an obvious question emerges. What exactly was being represented to business partners about the direction of the company? Material misrepresentation isn't a casual phrase in commercial settings. It's a legal concept describing situations where information presented to a counterparty differs in a meaningful way from the underlying reality. And the trademark issue doesn't make the picture any cleaner. 12 trademark categories were filed in Australia in September 2024. Yet none of those trademark filings provide authorization to sell food products in Australia. The trademark protects the brand identity. BICON approval authorizes the food products. Those are entirely different things. A commercial partner shown trademark filings as evidence of market readiness may have been shown something legitimate, but not something that answered the critical regulatory question. Lady Colin Campbell ultimately summarized her assessment of the business operation in a single sentence. Her words: "The woman has no idea about commerce. She has a very highly developed idea in terms of prostituting herself commercially, but that's not the same thing as having insight into a market." And then there's the figure Lady C referenced when asking viewers to do the math themselves. A reported monthly revenue figure of $19,000. A brand allegedly carrying $21 million in warehouse inventory. A Netflix partnership once valued in the neighborhood of $100 million. Do the math. So here's the verdict. Not the recap, the verdict. In January 2026, the official explanation for more than $21 million worth of unsold inventory was straightforward. International expansion plans. 8 weeks later, that same brand described international expansion as speculation. and stated that no decisions had yet been made. The Australian trademark application was filed in September 2024. But a trademark filing is not a food certification. Australia's food import system operates through BICON and requires separate inspections, testing, and labeling compliance for imported products. The FDA's export certification framework covers 6 destination markets. Australia isn't one of them, which means the expansion strategy, at least as it has been publicly described, cannot simply be implemented using the existing product line. It would require a market-by-market regulatory rebuild. Harry is reportedly in despair over the escalating costs. Netflix's chief content officer publicly stated in August 2025 that, as ever, products were consistently selling out in record time. 7 months later, Netflix was gone. The children are now appearing in promotional product content, and Lady Colin Campbell documented what she viewed as grandiosity long before any royal engagement ever took place. Hotel check-ins under pseudonyms. Privacy requirements for someone who had not yet achieved meaningful public recognition. The same pattern, the same performance. What began years ago with hotel registration requests from a cable television actress now appears in a different form. Multiple security escorts at fashion shows, People magazine sources discussing anniversary cards, and 2 young children featured in jam marketing videos to help sell products that millions of dollars worth of inventory have not managed to move on their own. The warehouse remains full. The regulatory barrier remains in place. International expansion remains, by the company's own public description, speculation with no decisions made. Lady C identified what she believed was the commercial problem in 2020. Tom Bauer identified what he viewed as the publicity mechanism in 2026, 6 years apart, 2 separate investigators. 2 entirely different source networks, yet both arrived at remarkably similar conclusions using different language. Lady C's assessment. She has no idea about commerce. She has inflated herself beyond natural entitlement. Bauer's assessment. She's a publicity junkie. Once a week she thinks, I haven't been in the news. What can I do? Different wording. Same underlying pattern. A pattern that, according to these critics, was visible before the royal marriage and became easier to trace once the inventory numbers surfaced afterward. So here's the question, and I want an actual theory in the comments. Not applause, not outrage, a theory. The Australian trademark filing was submitted in September 2024, 18 months before Netflix exited. 12 separate categories: clothing, skincare, jewelry, homeware, yoga straps, pet feeding mats. I'll repeat those last 2, yoga straps, pet feeding mats. The children are now appearing in the food marketing. The clothing line has been described by Shane Watson as the apparent Plan B. So, if the food business cannot realistically execute international expansion under its current product structure, and the children are now being positioned as part of the commercial narrative for the next stage, what exactly was that 12-category trademark portfolio filed in September 2024 designed to support? Because jam and honey brands don't typically require trademark protection for yoga straps and pet feeding mats, what do you think those 12 categories were actually preparing for? And do you think Harry knows? Leave your theory below. I read every single comment. This is the voice of truth. The trademark filing tells you where they're trying to go. The warehouse tells you where they are right now. And the distance between those 2 realities is the entire story.